Hello, my name is Ani Manchella. This is my CGT 245 developer commentary. The first thing I really want to get out of the way is honestly just how amazing this whole experience was. I mean, getting skill sets like coding, art, getting like importing, exporting art from one project to another was really incredible. A lot of the skills that I learned actually came from this project right here, this testing project, where I basically took an enemy AI and I basically messed with it, and I was like, let's just see what happens, you know. And that was really awesome and really interesting and super awesome just to see that how the effect entirely worked. Um, One of the biggest things that I did, however, was honestly talk about the different structures that I did for the different not structures, the different functionalities that I made for each and every character. For example, when I go to the RPG character, which is the third person character in the blueprint, you would say there is a lot of inputs when it comes to things like, well, assassinations or things that is like vaulting. Like, look, the locomotion input I got with the movement, the jump input, and the vaulting. Now these two come in with the engine, so I didn't really touch these. But what I did do was vaulting. The vaulting goes to its own function, which basically it has sphere traces by channel and casts them out and detects if there's enough space to actually vault over it. And then I use this by using things like animation montages and all of these things just to figure out how these all work. Now this code looks like spaghetti at times, but I promise it's very functional and I can sort of read it. The best part about doing all this was actually the enemy AI. The enemy AI has its own set and unique behavior tree things that I added, which is really interesting and really awesome for me to actually look at. So when we go to the enemy type A, we can go to the behavior tree, and we can see that in the actual tree, there is a lot, not a lot, there's a good amount of stuff here that I didn't really know before that I learned about and I really added into this project. One thing that I am working on now are using things like enumerators and structures. Enumerators give different states for everything, and that was really cool and really interesting for me to learn about and to grow and develop that skill as well. The player mode, which contains structures, was something I actually never used before, but when I saw it in code, it was really awesome. As my partner mainly wrote this, and then I basically have to take all of his code and debug it, and also, well, clean this part up too. So it was really awesome to see how all of this comes together into making really beautiful and simple code to create a level that is, in my opinion, a really cool and unique take on the classic 2D version, the 3D version of Geometry Dash. And I thought that was really awesome, and we called it Trigonometry Dash. You know, kind of goofy, but it works really well. That was that project, but one of my favorite parts of it was taking this project and creating level design from this project. And that's one thing that I know is really imperative when it comes to making games is having a good level design so that your character and the player is immersed in that project that you're working on. And so what I basically did was I took a lot of this assets from the animations from the Unreal animation sample, which we can actually go and check out right here. So in this animation sample, what I basically did was I took the actual character, so the character which is the this character right here. This is not where it is, but I took the basic animation blueprint of it and imported that over. I imported the child class over, not the parent class. That way I also get everything that that character actually does without having to code in my own child class, and I can just use the exact same parent class. Like, it doesn't matter for me there. Here I saw a lot of the things that you could do, and one of my favorite parts about this was actually how smooth the animations all looked. Now that was very much a animation production, not really something that was code based. But one thing that I also really loved was the little teleporters. So you have teleporters right here that take you back to the beginning of course 1, or you can go to course 2. And you can see these by having seeing what they are. Now if I go to the details tab, we can see where the destination is, and I can select the destination that I have simply based upon where each destination is. And I used that actually in my own project. So what I imported from the entirety of this project was actually the character, these teleporters, and these blocks. This block specifically being one that you can vault over, and then blocks like this where it's just placeholder blocks for you to run on. So when I take you to my project that I uploaded all this on, we can see that. Now, the textures might be a little bit different since they're all kind of default textures, but they all still practically work. The same buttons are over here. Now, you're wondering why is there buttons when there's a block over it? That's where we get to my next part of it, collision. I loved working with collision. I thought it was really awesome to work with things like that, especially since I was sick for a lot of this semester. Working with collisions and just messing around with collisions was really gratifying and really fun. So, for example, if I actually when I play this game and I move forward, I went over the destination. Nothing happens because there's nothing to teleport over. But then if I go here, I fall through and I hit the teleporters down there because there is no collision on that one box that is over here. And that is a really cool feature, and it also translates over to places like over here, where if there was collision on one of these boxes here, then you can actually run over them. If there is no collision, you would fall. And that is one thing that I thought was really cool. One thing I would actually do differently next time was maybe add a bit more to my interactables. So, for example, if I go to, let's say, one of these interactables, it just destroys the actor. There's no counter that happens, nothing like that. It just destroys the actor, and then you're done. One thing I would do differently is add more stuff to it. And one thing I would also want to do is maybe download some models from Sketchfab or other art places like that and implement those art things into my actual game. One thing I know that I can do really well is take models like Kratos from God of War, from the art station, and then download it and then put it up here, or I can just run around as Kratos. That'd be really interesting. All these types of things I'd probably want to do differently. One thing I'd also want to do differently is map my inputs in a better way. I feel like I kept trying to put the inputs, and this is honestly the way I do programming as a whole, is I like to make one mechanic at a time. I don't like to think about how all the mechanics come together, but rather I like to think about it one mechanic at a time. And those one mechanics at a time kind of build up, and eventually they compound, and I now have something that doesn't really make sense anymore. So one of the biggest things I think I'm gonna really think about is really have a plan and then go into this, which actually goes into the lectures that we learn of pre-production is really important. Pre-production is really key to making a good game because it allows you to think about all these mechanics, all these levels that you want to make, and then make them cohesively one at a time or together. Having that, making each one as it is really adaptable, and but you just never have a final product because you don't know what you want to keep going and ending up with. So they're all a bit different, but they're all really interesting for me to do. One thing I really liked though was having a fun and unique dialogue system where I get to go over here and interact with the person and just see, oh, well, there's more here that I can talk about and do that. As this, dialogue alluded to, there should be a day and night cycle here. So there's just more mechanics I would actually add, but one of the biggest ways that I would change is just the way I would code, is really planning it out and then going to it later. And I think this is really because I just had a lot of time on my hands since I was really sick. I couldn't go to labs, I couldn't go to lectures, so while I would just sit at home and experiment and do all these things, eventually it didn't really matter because, well, I didn't really code anything. I just learned everything. I just learned a lot. So I think one thing I would really change next time is really go for making it more cohesive so that I can actually program everything better. That was also a huge problem for me too, especially when it comes to the game that I made, on my own, just testing things out. This enemy AI was something that, oh my god, it was so struggling just to learn like the tasks, the services that each one has. Like tasks are different than services in a behavior tree, and they all come together to do sequences. And then why is it didn't feel cohesive. I didn't feel like I was really doing something productive. And then as I explained and explored more and more, as more was explained to me, and as I explored more, it was a lot more interesting for me to see how these were more beneficial than just writing this out through nodes in code. But a lot of it was just very much just I don't know, and therefore I had to go somewhere to learn. And that brings me to the last point of just straight up modeling. A huge part of game design and game development is having a story be told through all your models. And the fact that these models can tell a story is awesome because now I can say, well, this is what my family veranda looks like when I go back home. This is a cool chapel from like a fantasy setting that'd be really awesome. Things like that. So the vision that I have is meant to be that vision, is meant to evoke, some kind of change or some kind of story from game development and game design, just from level design alone. And I think that's what I really try to accomplish, and I think that's what I did. Thank you for listening, and that is my developer commentary.